Well, Odon, back again on the Quran, and you're going to actually introduce a real humdinger. These are the kind of things that I get excited about, because one of the questions that has come up by a guy named Odon Ghosh concerns all these other teachings in the Quran that are other traditions that don't really follow in line with what we know the Quran to be, which suggests maybe they are interpolations that have been added at a later time. And you're going to do something, because I know where you're going to go with this. You're actually going to answer this, but you're also going to show it from two different verses in the Quran, two different chapters in the Quran, how that these interpolations actually destroy the cadence and destroy the structure of the very chapters that that are lifted out of Christian catechisms. So let me give you these are the kind of stuff we're waiting for. This is the kind of stuff, Odon, you can really be helpful with us, because this proves two different things. Not only is this lifted from another source, but there has been an interpolation that has been added at a later date. So you're going to show that there's a sequence in the evolution of these in this case, two different chapters, proving just how man-made this book is. And it is not eternal, and it does not come from Allah, and it doesn't come from Muhammad. It doesn't even come from Muslims. It actually comes from Christians. Okay, let me just introduce the question to you by Odon Ghosh, who says, what about other traditions found in the Quran, like wife beating or polygamy and sex slaves? What is the origin of such non-Judaism in Islam? Are these Iraqi traditions added much later during the Abbasid period? Over to you. Can't wait for you to give your response.
So, in a sense, this relates to the patchwork issue we were talking about previously. But here we are doing a sort of, like in the Inception movie, we are going deeper. You see, there is a patchwork structure in the Quran. We already addressed this. The text is like made of bits, different bits sewn together. But when we really look into the bits, we also see that those bits are also patchwork. This is the second level of Inception. And this is a way to answer Odon Ghosh about those other traditions found in the Quran. I want here to show you what this very top-notch French scholar discovered with his students. His name is Guillaume Dye. Guillaume Dye is a very, very proficient, very top-notch Quranic scholar, French scholar. And with his student, he discovered that in Surah 23 and in Surah 70, there is an interpolation, a passage which allows sex with many wives and sex slaves, and that obviously, and this is very evident, it is an interpolation. It is something that has been added to a previous text, which was stricter, which was a Christian-like text. The best thing will be to look at the verses. Here we have them in the Qur'an Gateway website. This is QuranGateway.org, a website made by scholars for scholars to study the Quran. Here we have Surah 23 from verse 1 to verse 11. And Surah 23 is a sort of guideline for believers, telling them how they should behave. We have the translation. We have many translations here. I've chosen Droge translation. We have Muslim translations also, but it's kind of the same. And we see that we have a very strict pattern, very strict rules for believers. The believers are prospered, they are humbled in their prayers, they turn away from frivolous talk, they give the alms, They guard their private parts. It's all about chastity here. But here we have the interpolation, except from their wives or the slaves. Slaves is what their right hands own. Surely they are not to be blamed, but whoever seeks beyond that, those, they are the transgressor. And here we go back to a very strict guideline, very strict rules. And those who keep their pledges and who guard their prayer, those are the inheritors, and they will inherit paradise, and so on. And in Surah 70, we have the very exact, the very same interpolation. This one. Here, let's look at Surah 70 from verse 24 to verse 35. And we have also a guideline for the believers, not so those devoted to prayer, those who remain steadfast to their prayer, those in whose ways is a recognized right, and so on, those who hold the truth, and those who fear, those who guard their chastity, except with their wives and their slaves, the captives whom their right hands possess, for they are not to be blamed, but those who trespass beyond this are transgressors. And thereafter, we go back to the strict guideline, the strict rules. And this is here, this passage is, when you look at it in Arabic, it is exactly the same as in Surah 23. And what Guillaume Dye and his student also found is that the strict passages from here and here to here, and also in Surah 70, from here and then to here, they are taken from Christian books. They are taken from Christian treatises, which were written for the education of catechumens. Catechumens are young Christian converts who seek baptism and who are to be taught about the Christian way of life. For example, about chastity. And what we see here, what we can get from here, what we can gather from this is that maybe at a point, the sermons, the preachers who taught the Arabs at the beginning of the 7th century, they taught them Christian-like rules. And at some point, but we don't know when, we don't know exactly how, interpolations were added to lessen the rules, to lessen the chastity rules, to allow polygamy, because this is talking about many wives, and there is no polygamy in Christianity, to allow sex slaves, and there is, of course, no sex slaves in Christianity also. So obviously, this was made to maybe attract the Arabs, or maybe this was made during a later time, maybe during the time of the Arab leaders, to soften the rules and to allow the believers to enjoy the spoils of war. But what we see, this is really evident here, is that the Quran did not came as a whole at first, like a fully fledged book. There has been a process of writing and rewriting, and there have been some interpolations. The rules were changed, and this is so evident. This is really hard evidence from the Quran. We have evidence that the Quran has been tampered with, that there is a process. There is a process, and this could explain why there are some other tradition in the Quran. Why the Quran is so patchworky. Why it is such a patchwork? It is a patchwork because the stories, for example, the biblical stories, the commentaries about the Bible, have been kind of cut and resewn and put together, and you find one story there and another story there, and so on. And here we see that the very stories, the very teaching have also been tampered with, have also been changed in order to accommodate a more permissive way of life, to accommodate sex slaves and polygamy, in fact. So this is an example that might answer Arunaba's question. And there is also something else to say about those passages in Surah 23 and Surah 70. You see, when you look at the structure of the text, the interpolation kind of broke this structure. Let me go back to the verses. When you look, for example, at Surah 23, we have the original text was from verse 1 to verse 6 to verse 5 here, and from verse 8 to verse 11. When you look at the text like this, without the middle interpolation, you have something that is coherent, that shows a Christian way of life, and also we have a text that has a structure, and this very structure has been broken. For example, look at here. We have a sort of introduction. Qad aflaha al-mu'minat al-hadina fi salatim khashishuna. Then every verse begins with a wa, and wa, and then the conclusion. And in the Christian way, in the Aramaic Christian way of composing text, in the orality environments, this was very structured. You have, for example, here a text with from 1 to 11 minus 2, which means a text with 9 verses, and the first 2 verses kind of echo the 2 last verses. You see, you have the text like this: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, up to the 9th verse, and the first verse and the second verse echo the second and the last. The believers have prospered; they are humble in their prayer. Those, they are the inheritors; they will inherit paradise; they will remain. And this is a kind of a mnemonic, you know, in order to memorize the text. Those who abide by the orality tradition, they compose it like this. The first 2 parts, they go together, and thereafter it is much more easier to remember the other because they are all made the same. Wa ladina, wa ladina, wa ladina, wa ladina, wa ladina. And by adding this interpolation, you can see that the very structure of this passage has been broken. Mm-hmm. You can see those are not originals. There is no waladina. There was supposed to be a waladina, and everything is broken. And it is the same here with the verse 70. This is the same structure with ladina, waladina, and so on. And the structure is broken by the interpolation. This is what proficient scholar can gather out of the Quran. And this gives us clues and even evidence of the process which made the Quran into the Quran. You see, there were teachings, at first sermons, homilies, and they were very close to what we find in Christian treatises, Christian books. It does not mean it's a copy. It might be it's a translation into Arabic. It's an adaptation into Arabic, but it is very, very close. Even in its very structure, it is very, very close to the original Aramaic Christian compositions. And they were taught, they were preached, and something happened at a moment. So we don't know exactly how and when. Was it from during the time of the Nazarenes or during the time of the Arab leaders? But the text was changed in order to fit the Arab leaders' views. I think it was, I told about the spoils of war. it was it was made in order to attract people into becoming warriors for the Amir, for the Arab leader, by promising him many wives and sex slaves.
Wow. I mean, what you've done here, this is brilliant, because you've kind of killed two birds with one stone in your response here to Odon Lafontaine. And this has always been a problem. Why is when you read the Quran, you can see that there are a lot of these traditions that seem to be very carnal in nature. Very carnal. Wife beating, sex slaves, polygamy. This is not the Christian way. This is not what you see in any Christian text. And you have answered that by saying, let's just look at these two chapters, chapter 23, chapter 70. Take a look. It's the exact same catechism. This is lifted right out of a catechism for those who are in the church. And if you look at it, there's everything we can agree with there. It is full of, be careful in the world that you must be lived differently from the world lives differently, especially when it comes to chastity. And not only is it done in a poetic form, so the mnemonics is there so that you can memorize it easier. So that's what a catechism is. You memorize it, and then you have to be able to repeat it to the priest in order before you can get baptized. So it's there. You can see the structure is created so to help the people to memorize it. Suddenly, however, in the middle of it, boom, you have this interjection. Say, well, except the wives, plural, means more than one wife, and also those which your right hand possesses. And everybody knows that in Arabic, whenever it says right hand possesseth, that means sex slaves. These are women who you get in warfare, and you now possess them. That means these are concubines. So here
captives.
Right after the time. Go ahead.
It means captives.
Captive slaves.
It doesn't mean sex slaves, but in the context, we understand that it is about sex slaves.
These are always sex slaves. And look at the context right after the reference on keep to your chastity, except your wives, plural, and that which your right hand possesses. Now that means sex slaves. So it just carnalizes what was pure. And it takes that which was holy and made to keep people from being impure and impurify it. It makes it absolutely almost dirty when you stop and think about it. And yet that does what you have said is this is interjected to appease the carnal mindset of many of the Arabs at that time, including the Amirs, who were probably practicing it very much themselves. They were having many concubines from their right hands of war, and they had also many wives, which was fascinating because that only shows that this is borrowed from those traditions, these catechisms, but it was been bastardized by the very people that borrowed them to then meet their own sexual needs. Wow, you hit two things simultaneously without even realizing it, proving once again that this is a book written by men and for men, to say, but for men who want as much promiscuity as possible. And I thank God that this is not something from my God or anything that I see in my scriptures. Thank God we're only to have one wife, and we are to have no sex slaves whatsoever. Now, we don't go to war to get sex slaves. And Jesus was very clear that you're only to have one wife and for life. So this has been great. You've been able to really answer Odon Lafontaine, and you're also showing just how carnal the Quran is. God bless you. Thanks so much. These are the things we're looking for, and you're giving us some real gems here. This is Jay and Odon, 3,000 miles apart. Over and out.